This speech is quite well known, quite well remembered, to the point where people who go to see it in the theatre are sometimes thrown by other people mouthing it along with the actors. It's the to be or not to be soliloquy. Now, it seems odd that an examiner would ever put this in front of you and ask you to comment on it, but they really might, and there's no reason why they shouldn't. However, there's a problem. The problem being that if your game is slightly to take Hamlet's temperature, as I keep saying, and to work out where he is in his journey towards maturity, his acceptance of death, however you see it, this speech is difficult to place. It's difficult to place because, well, Shakespeare seems to put it in a number of different places. Performers put it in all sorts of different places. In Q1 and F, it appears much earlier than it does here. So when Polonius is trying to test him and find out if he's mad, all that business about are you a fishmonger, it comes just before that, so it's already happened. Benedict Cumberbatch recently tried doing it at the very front of the play, and that was at a press night, and the press thought it was so ridiculous that the theatre company shrewdly decided not to do that and to put it in one of the more sensible places. Peter Brook puts it really close to the end at 4 scene 4, where you might expect that speech, how all occasions do inform against me, when he's looking at the massing army. So it's really quite hard to work out where people want to put it. And one of the reasons is it's so freestanding. It doesn't appear to spring from any actual action, to the point where there are actually 2 points. Either it's at Act 2, Scene 2, or it's at Act 3, Scene 1. And either way, you've got the question of what is it that prompts it? And in both versions, Shakespeare has this kind of, let's make a test. This is the big moment when the king and Polonius are going to eavesdrop on him. And either way, the stage is conspicuously cleared. I say conspicuously because it isn't really. It's meant to look like it's cleared so that Hamlet can offer this thought. Anyway, let's look at it as a speech in itself, while bearing in mind that in either instance, it's being overheard. And what we may notice, or one line I'm going to try selling you, is that for a man who's putting on an antic disposition, this is bizarrely rational. If we look at it, just to look at that famous first line, to be or not to be, that is the question. It's the most dialectic piece of pentameter you can imagine. And by dialectic, I mean it's got a thesis. Is it a good idea to be, to exist? And on the other hand, then you've got a very quick caesura after 2 syllables, or not to be, weighing up 2 options. That is the question. And even by saying that is the question, he's saying that he is going to pursue this as a line of theoretical inquiry. This is the student from Wittenberg speaking, rather than anybody who's mistaking anybody for a fishmonger or who claimed to tell a hawk from a handsaw. And in carrying on, admittedly with a mixed range of metaphors, he does weigh up the options and evaluates them with his usual poetic colour. He also, just structurally, and I don't know if you've ever tried to memorise this speech, but one of the issues is just structurally, he has these caesuras here and he reboots to die, to sleep. He's weighing up the options. But even then, on both iterations of to die, to sleep, he reaches a different conclusion. That's not to say he's mad, it's to say he's balanced. So he's got, on the one hand, you relieve yourself of all of the problems, all the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. That number, he's going to pick up on it with a list later on. But then, again, in that absolutely focused on the life of the mind way he hits it again, to sleep, perchance to dream. And then, perhaps his overthinking has come up with a scruple. It's come up with the possibility that this this course of action is actually more scary and invites more of a sense of the of the next world than he'd actually like at this stage. So again, there's his willingness to think, to overthink, and also to think about the next world, constantly bearing in mind that he knows about the next world because he's been visited by somebody from it. That does, while we're at it, make a slight puzzle about these lines here. The undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns. Well, I suppose you could argue that his father hasn't exactly returned, not corporeally anyhow, but that there is a sense, at least in Hamlet's head, of what goes on beyond our experience. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Now, another way we could look at that is that if you think about it, there's a kind of paradox in that not being, the decision to not be, does involve a course of action, even though not existing is about the kind of zero of doing anything, if you see what I mean. So he does actually conclude by saying that, I mean, he actually, as ever, he draws the link of self-slaughter, something he's alluded to earlier on. He links it to his other decision that he has to make about killing the king. The native hue of resolution is sickly dour with the pale cast of thought. And enterprises of great pitch and moment, note the plural there, so that it can include, in Hamlet's absolutely characteristic mode of speaking, it can make a very general case out of something that's just occurred to him. Enterprises of great pitch and moment, with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. So that's another thing he's not going to do. He's not even going to not be. Now, we can't really leave this speech without touching on the extraordinary, the really compelling part right at the middle. A bit that I just really like this bit. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time? And then Shakespeare lists all of the things that hack him off. Now, some people say the pangs of despised love is perhaps the most revealing. Dominic Dromgoole is among them, and thinking that's the most human of his outpourings. But all the other things tally with it as well. So, but one and so you can lump it together with the idea of the contemptus mundi. He's actually quite detailed at this point about this very specific things about the world that annoy him. This isn't just metaphysical. This isn't just a stale promontory. This isn't just a garden that things gross and rank in nature possess merely. This is really specific. This points not only to the universe, but to the corruption of the court, the law's delay, the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes. Now, it's just worth making two quick points about this. One is that Hamlet, as some editors note, is unlikely to have had much direct experience of this because he is himself a prince. You can take that thought into two different directions. One is that he is a man of such sensibilities that he can empathise with those around him, whoever they are. After all, he spends quite a lot of time mimicking them, and that might not be to take the piss. It might be to tune into them and to take their pulse, to give each age its pressure. But it might also be revealing in that it might also reveal his popularity, because that is a two-way process, isn't it? That people are going to relate to him as well. And if you bear in mind that he is loved by the distracted multitude, as Claudius says at one point, and at another point he says that they convert his jibes to graces, he is loved. He appears to have a sense of what people want. And it makes him, particularly in more progressive, Soviet style or post-Soviet style, Eastern Bloc style ways of presenting this narrative. It makes him a very useful poster bearer for regime change. So even at his most intimate and reflective, somehow you get a glimpse of Hamlet the revolutionary, if only he could get it together to revolt. One last thing, if we're going to look at this, and we began by thinking about how mad is he, how rational he is. Dr. Johnson, when writing about this, he looked at the bit "soft you now, the fair Ophelia." He's actually saying hello to her, and then saying something which, in a not all that far distantly Roman Catholic context, makes perfect sense. "Nymph, in thy orisons, in your prayers, be all my sins remembered." He's about to talk about some of those sins. But for the time being, Dr. Johnson diagnoses this as being entirely rational, to the point where he appears to have forgotten his antic disposition. He's caught off guard. That, of course, makes us think about the overall context of this speech. He's caught off guard because he's very carefully guarded. In David Tennant's production, you notice, and we'll look at it in our next slide, but you'll notice that David Tennant shows an awareness of the camera which is chilling, and you wonder when he started to become aware. Still, I quite like the idea that he wasn't completely expecting to be so observed, at least when he's emerging from his thoughts.